Hello.
Hiya. I
How are
was just
you?
emailing because I'm not sure whether it's letting you be co-host or not.
Oh, don't know
It'll
very
be
much
fine.
about
You're here
this.
and you're on video. That's all that matters. We'll turn everyone else off, so that's fine.
Yeah, that's fun. Right.
I've saved it multiple times as you as co-host, but every time I go in, you've disappeared. So I don't know. But like I say, you're here. You're on video. That's all that matters. So I'm not even
Yeah.
going to worry about it.
No, we can have a chat. Am I clear? Can you hear me clearly?
I can hear you fine. Can you hear me? Okay. I've got a new microphone.
Perfectly. Yeah.
I'm dead
It's all
excited.
good. I
How are
didn't want
you?
to leave. Very tired. I was in London last week working. And then I was getting ready for a legal aid audit, which is tomorrow. We have our quarterly meeting today. So it's kind of full on at the moment. So
Audits never seem to they seem to drain your energy before you even started.
yeah, and it's just it's a full week and lots of I do a lot of training with students. So our first course gets launched in September, so we're not far off.
So training a new batch of mediators.
Yeah, I have to talk to you at some point about because I'm having kind of a commission thing, so people recruit them, then they get paid commission. And it's lots of people come to be a mediator after they've had the experience of going through court. And I think that's because they understand it then. I'm going to get some water actually before.
Yeah, do it. Yeah, go for it.
It's always a good idea. Right, I'm not wearing a full suit because yesterday was 35 degrees.
Oh, it was
It's
warm
quite
yesterday.
warm. So wearing a shirt is a lot.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I mean, this is very casual, so definitely if you prefer to wear a t-shirt and shorts, I'm fine with that. Right, I was just checking that all the emails have gone off.
How many are we expecting today?
I think there was about. I'll bring it up. It'll be easier than me guessing. Over 70 people registered. So.
Oh, that's good. Also, people watch after the event.
Yeah, absolutely. So we tend to get about half, maybe a third of what people subscribe, the amount of people that sign up. But then people watch the replay just because it's 11 o'clock on a Monday morning, and life always seems to happen on a Monday morning. Yeah.
I've just got a very quick urgent thing for one of my colleagues, so I'm just going to just one second.
All right, no problem.
Dorian, Nadia wants you urgently.
So I will tell everyone when it officially starts at 11.
Yeah,
but
sure.
I keep everyone has their cameras off and on mute. So for about 40 minutes ish, we'll just chat and go through. I've written some questions, but it'll be organic. So if we go off on a tangent, then we do. It's all fine. And then for about the last 20 minutes, I will open the chat and get people to ask any questions in there. Because if they try and do it throughout the thing, I'm terrible. I get distracted and I'll be trying to read them and I won't be listening to you. And it's just a lot easier if I just shut that off completely. So it's just the two of us sort of talking in that time, and then it works better for me.
Yeah, that's all good.
And then afterwards, so obviously it's automatically recording and transcribing this. So what I would do is I will take what we talked about and turn it into a bit of a toolkit for people so that they've got something to take away from this. So as well as the recording, I'll go into a bit more depth on certain things if I need to, just to give them something to take away as well. Yeah, that's about it. I really can today. They say, don't they, right palm is good, it's receiving, so
is it?
Bring it on. Proper Richard this morning.
For me, it's normally a mosquito bite.
Yeah, no, it's not. No bites. No bites. Got one of them on that arm, but no, nothing on there. Just yeah, all about receiving good stuff.
Good.
Only the good.
Well, hopefully it'll be good today. So
it'll be great. It's a rare opportunity for people to speak to a mediator that they're not engaged in and paying, and all of those things. So it's a different dynamic, and I think that's really important for them to have that safer space to meet someone who can give them some insight that they wouldn't have, because most people go into mediation not having the foggiest idea of what it is.
Saying that. I was in London talking to the secretary of the Law Society, and I said, even solicitors don't know what we do.
Exactly.
So there's no chance the public are going to know what we do. And
you're in a blind panic most of the time anyway. Like, even if you're not in, the sort of cases that I deal with, which are, traumatic and a lot of manipulation and conflict, then even like a normal mediation case, it's just like you're just in the worst thing, because you're trained as a kid not to go to court. You've done something really bad if you ever end up in court, and yet here you are, you just you had a relationship that didn't work out and now you're in court. So all this, it brings up a lot of stuff.
I think it's the polarization of court as well which causes problems, and that's what mediation isn't about. So
but it's hard for people to know, because I think they do see it as being part of that process. And so they come in maybe on edge, worried about how they're going to be judged, how they're going to be seen. So it's a really good opportunity today for people to understand what is mediation, what is it and what isn't it. So what can you do, what can't you do, and where does it fit, and all of that. Because like I say, I think most people just don't. You just do it because you're told to do it. Yeah,
it's part of a process. And going through it.
It's a tick box for a lot of people, unfortunately.
And
I think there's real power in it if it's used correctly and with the right people involved. But it's, there's a lot of variables within that, which we're going to kind of talk about today.
Always.
So we've got a few minutes to go. Don't worry, like I said, don't worry too much about how many people are here. It might be lower today. I think because of the nature of, obviously my site is called Get Court Ready, and a lot of people are in the court process, so maybe felt okay.
But they can use mediation even within the court.
Absolutely, and I think that it's still going to be valuable. It is going to be valuable, regardless of what phase of the process they're in, but just conscious of how it might be perceived by people who go, I've already done that, or it doesn't work, or I don't have to do that, that kind of thinking. But 72 people will get the copy of this sent.
Brilliant.
So it will get out to that many people, it will get heard. So we're not speaking into the ethers. So thank you to everyone who is here. Really appreciate you. I know it's Monday morning, 11 o'clock. We're closing in on the school holidays as well. So I am debating whether to take a break over the school holidays. I will put it out to my audience of what's going to be easiest for them. And for me, because, child got involved in childcare as well. So I need to, don't want to commit myself to something that is actually going to cause me more stress in the long run, but we'll see. Anyway, okay, a couple more minutes. So if you want to take a minute, take a breath, whatever, do a little mantra, however you prepare for these kind of things.
I was filming and I had to do 24 short videos in 2 days in a studio, and that was absolutely draining. Yeah, it's very different, the kind of persona you have to put on screen than the persona you have on, when you're having a one-to-one with somebody.
Yeah, it's strange, isn't it? Because I deliver courses is what I offer, and I think I don't know. I feel like I can only be me. I kind of talk to the camera in when I'm doing a course in the same way that I would talk to someone anyway. I just don't think of it, and then maybe that's just me, So, but I think I look at some other people that have done them very professionally, and I think, oh God, should I be a bit more like that? Should I
think you have to be relatable to people. I think that's really
exactly. And I think particularly in the things I'm talking about, it's far more beneficial for them to see my face and to know me. And I don't edit my videos when I do them in my courses either. So if I trip over my words, I trip over them, because again, I'm not trying to sell perfection.
No,
I want people to see the reality and the realness of it all. So yeah, it's something I feel like. Anyway, we are at the 11 o'clock mark, so let's, for the purposes of the transcription and the recording, let's get started. So before we get started, I am just going to do a little bit of housekeeping for everyone. We will have people that continue to join and come late and that, but videos off and mute yourself, which you've all done brilliantly without asking. I believe I did put it in the email, but thank you all for that. We're going to run for about 40 minutes of Stuart and I talking, chatting. I've got some questions that I think cover the sort of things that you might ask, and then we'll do a Q&A section for about 20 minutes at the end. But if you can save your questions until that last 20 minutes rather than putting them in the chat, because I get distracted when the chat messages come up, and I want to be able to focus on Stuart and what he's saying, rather than my eye being drawn and my mind going off. So just, if you've got a notepad, just write down if Stuart says something or I say something and you think, oh, I want to ask about that, just pop a note down and we will come back to it. I will try and make sure that we get everyone's questions asked, although I am conscious of Stuart's time. Please be kind to everyone. Know that everyone is at a different stage of their journey in this, and so if you do feel dysregulated, have your tools ready to do that, whether it's take a deep breath, just do some big doodling, whatever it is that you need to just take a breath and calm down. That will really help as well, because I'm not moderating. I'm not there to moderate the chat or anything, so I'm relying on you guys to be able to do that yourself. Okay, so I'm very, very pleased to be joined by Stuart this morning. Morning, Stuart.
Good morning. Good morning.
Thank you ever such a lot. Stuart is a highly experienced mediator. You've also got a history in being a magistrate within the family court as well. So a really good understanding of the full breadth of the experience that a lot of you have had, are having, or have, or are about to have. We are only going to focus on mediation today, though. We will come back and talk to you a little bit at some point in the future, hopefully, about the magistrate's role, and if I can convince Stuart to come and do that, because I think that's important as well. So Stuart, do you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself? And I know that there's also about legal aid element as well. Did you want to just mention that briefly as well? That'd be great.
So thank you very much, Sarah, and thank you very much for the invite to speak to everybody at Get Court Ready. I am an accredited family mediator, and an accredited family mediator means that I'm regulated. So there are lots of mediators out there who aren't regulated. So it's really important to always make sure that when you're dealing with somebody, whether it's me or one of my team or another mediator, that they are regulated. So the regulator for family mediation is the Family Mediation Council. So it's FMC. That's the kind of acronym that's commonly used, and it's really important that you check on the register on the FMC website that your mediator, who you're going to be dealing with, is on that register. So I can assure you that I and my staff are on that register. And that gives you that peace of mind that the person that you're dealing with is a professional. As Sarah said, I am experienced. I'm a PPC as well. It's lots of little acronyms going to be flying around, and I'll do my best to explain them. That means professional practice consultant. So that basically means I supervise the work of other mediators as well. So maybe they're training to become an accredited mediator, or they're already a mediator, but for professional practice purposes, I meet with them 4 times a year to discuss difficult cases. It's being at that sounding board, and with the experience that I have, hopefully that assists and supports other mediators who are dealing with cases. So they have a backup and someone to talk through maybe how to manage a case, or if a case is needing to have some input from somebody else, I can be brought along as a neutral third party to have a conversation as well. So about me, as you said, yes, I was a family magistrate. Before that, I practiced immigration law and still do to this day. I'm a teacher. I teach mediation skills, and I work with cases from all over the world. So England predominantly, but also here. I'm based in Spain. My company is based in the UK. But I do cases here as well with the expat community. So a real variety of people we meet in the mediation room, and yeah, makes life very varied. So that's a little bit about me, and about a little bit about the accreditation and what to look out for when selecting your mediator. You did ask me, Sarah, as well, because as the mediator, I need to be a bit more concise, don't I? Talk about legal aid. Legal aid is quite a rarity now. I'll stand on my soapbox for 2 seconds. There hasn't been any funding increase in 25 years from the government. So very few people carry out family mediation, which is legally aided. So very much trying to find a provider is very tricky. There is a website called Justice Finder, website that can assist in finding legal aid providers, but there aren't that many around. So we're one of the few. We cover the whole of England and Wales, and nowadays, generally speaking, most cases are actually done online. So through Zoom, through Google Meets like this meeting, through WhatsApp video. So lots of different platforms that we use, even FaceTime. So there's generally a platform that we can use to support communication. So in addition to legal aid, there is the the Family Mediation Voucher Scheme, and that's a really big thing. It's a temporary scheme, the government says, this government and the previous one, and that there's no means test. So if you're a millionaire, or if you have £10 to your name, you can have access to that money. And that's £500 to be spent on mediation, not the initial meeting, the MIAM, and the mediation information and assessment meeting, but on the mediation itself. And that is for the case, not for the individual. There you are. That's a very brief summary about legal aid and other things that are going on.
That's great, and I will share your contact details in the stuff that I send out afterwards. So if people do have any specific questions that aren't covered in our Q&A, then obviously they can reach out and ask you directly. So the first bit that I wanted to look at is really this kind of idea about, especially in the cases where I'm involved and the people that on in this call are involved, is when can mediation help and when can it hurt? So I think to start off with, I think what's really important, and you've done kind of a bit of a summary on this, is what is mediation, and what should people expect from that process, just to manage expectations?
Yeah. So most simple kind of description of, or definition of what mediation is a conversation. It's a conversation that I, as a mediator, facilitate between two people. and it's legally privileged, which means it's confidential. And it's really important that people know that they have the freedom to speak about what they need to speak about. So they set the agenda and agree the agenda together. They agree how they manage which item they manage first and work through it. And the mediator is there to make sure it's KFC. So now everybody says, what's KFC? But it's not the famous chicken emporium. It is kind, fair, and constructive. And that, I didn't come up with that myself. I wish I had. It's stolen from a very good trainer who's based in the Republic of Ireland, called Tony Kearney. And he came up with it. I think it is the easiest way to understand how a conversation of mediation should be. And if you keep to those principles of being kind, fair, and constructive, then mediation will certainly be a better experience than not keeping to those, because what we're trying to do in the mediator is to ensure that those kind of key principles are maintained, and that the conversation is moving forward, not going back to the past, because we can't change anything in the past. What's happened there, it's important to understand it, but mediation is forward facing. So we're looking at a constructive conversation that's forward facing, and well, hopefully will be working for both people in the meeting. It's not about mediator making decisions. Those decisions are down to the individuals. No mediator will ever tell you what to do. They come up with ideas and suggestions, but ultimately the decision making will always be down to the two participants. It's voluntary, so nobody's forcing anybody to come to mediation. It may feel like that because of current changes in the kind of court process, but ultimately it's a conversation where you don't have to agree to anything. It's legally privileged, so nobody can refer to it in court. And if you do come to an agreement, then there's different ways of making that maybe into a court order or into a parenting plan, finding a way forward for you that is very personalized and individualized. Ultimately, in mediation, you will have more time to focus on the issues that are important to you than you will have in court. And I know that because I've been in both positions.
Thank you for clarifying that. I think a couple of things that came up for me was, I think, again, this might just be a me thing, so I apologize if anyone on the call thinks, no, I don't think that. I think maybe I was under the impression, or it certainly feels sometimes like the mediator is more of a referee, or it's certainly in these kind of cases that people maybe look to the mediator to be the referee of like, we can't agree, we keep having these circular conversations that we're going round and round, and they maybe look to the referee to step in and then take control. But what you're saying is actually, no, mediate, that's not what we're here to do. We're here to just keep bringing it back to the agenda, to the points. Have I interpreted that correctly, or is there some nuance?
I think, I think I often see myself as a guide. So in mediation, if you think, I often say I'm not a miracle worker, but you have the couple that are with me, that are sitting there, have had, like you just explained, conversations that have just gone in a circle, that haven't moved forward. And we're looking at having new conversations. And I call this an exploration. We're going into the unknown. Because if we go into the known, we're probably going to have the same results as we had before. And having a conversation about the unknown is really scary. And I think when you go into the jungle, you need to have a guide with you. And the mediator is that guide to navigate you through safely, having those kind, fair and constructive conversations, bringing us back to those to that path, and hopefully trying to find a destination, which is your agenda point. But it's about having new conversations, about thinking about things that you may not have considered before. Mediators are experienced in conflict. They're experienced in discussing child arrangements and financial arrangements. And it's also critical that you take, you're in this you're on this journey because you want to be on it, that you're wanting to discover something different, something new. Because if you don't, then mediation isn't the right place. If you want somebody to tell you what to do, then yeah, of course, the right environment for you. If you are wanting to genuinely try and discover something that you haven't thought about, I often say I have my tool bag. And in my tool bag, I have lots and lots of different.
I don't know if that's just me that's frozen or whether that's Stuart that's frozen. If anyone can let me know in the chat, that'd be great.
Done.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, I'm back, am I? Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
So it's about having trust, and I think you have to have absolute trust in the meeting. When you meet with a mediator, it's really important.
Okay. So,
I'm losing connection. I can see that it's saying that.
You're all right at the moment.
There? I can't see you.
A couple of seconds, but we're all right. We're back now. So I think one of the things you said there was new conversations. What we tend to find with some of these personality types that we're dealing with is almost a lack of ability or capability of having new conversations. They are very rigid in their thought patterns, and so they might present it slightly differently, they might try and use different words, but ultimately they're very much, I'm stuck here, I'm not going to move from here. So in terms of both for the person who is in that room, who's had these conversations a million and one times and has felt bullied by this person, because they know they never back down, I'm either going to have to agree or not, and I know what not means, I know what that looks like. What can they do in these situations when they're in mediation, but equally in terms of what can they expect a mediator to do in those situations? Because at some point it might prove that it's all right for one person to come in and do the KFC, but if the other person is coming in and going, no, my way or the highway, again, not saying that's men and women, I work with both, and so it's how does a mediator handle that, but also how does the person in mediation handle that? Is it up to them? Do they have the power to say, you know what, this isn't working out? What the consequences of that? Or are there ways that can evolve? Again, can you offer them some guidance on what would be the next thing for them to do when they feel trapped in this kind of conversation that isn't new at all and is unwilling to go new?
So I think the most important thing is that before mediation starts, you have something called a meeting called a MIAM. That's a mediation, information and assessment meeting. That's just you and the mediator. And that mediation meeting, the MIAM meeting, the information assessment meeting, is confidential. So you can talk about anything you want. And you may say, I've been experiencing this, this, and this. So the mediator becomes aware of it. You have the opportunity to talk about domestic abuse, domestic violence, coercive control, and the mediator will actively ask you to talk about that. They'll ask about, well, how do you manage conflict within your relationship? And all these things will be taken into consideration. And equally, the other participant will also have a meeting like this. Mediators are aware and monitor the power balance within a room. And if there is an imbalance, then the mediator tries to address it. And if that can't be addressed, then the mediator will cease the meeting. Equally, it's a voluntary process. It's one of the key principles of mediation. And if you feel that it's not going anywhere, that's fine. You've tried it. You may want to stop, have a break. You may want to finish the meeting entirely and never come back to mediation and want to go to arbitration or go to court, or actually do nothing. You may want to leave it as it is. The choice is ultimately down to you, but the mediator also is trained to recognize power imbalances and to step in. Regarding kind of fossilized, I call them fossilized kind of points of view, mediator will ask questions. So, okay, tell me about why you come to that decision. Tell me why this is the only option. Would you consider anything else? We do, what is the best case scenario? What's the worst case scenario? What we try and do is encourage flexibility by asking questions. And if we don't see any flexibility, I often say, well, this isn't mediation. This is just making demands, and it would be shut down again. If you're going in circles and you're not progressing, then the mediator will shut the meeting down as well. So everybody's there in a voluntary capacity, including the mediator. I can say that. I say, if you're making me feel really uncomfortable, I don't want to be in this meeting. I often say, you know, we've got those rules. The agreement to mediate at the very beginning outlines a long list of rules, and we can add to those as well based on the individuals that we have. But we all agree to them and sign them about those key principles of mediation and how we're going to conduct ourselves, and the understanding that the mediator can also terminate the meeting at any point, as can anybody within that meeting.
So what would be I don't like, maybe not the right word, but consequences of that? So say someone did think, you know, I don't feel safe in this environment, I don't feel, I don't think we're getting anywhere, and they chose to end it. Would there be any, you know, what does the mediator contribute in any way to the court? Do they say what's happened, or is it just, okay, so can you talk me through, this is fascinating for me. I hope that the people watching
it's okay.
Well, so I find it really interesting.
So a lot of the time, this is my approach. So every mediator is going to be slightly different in how they deal with this. And I often, when we get to an impasse, when we get to a point where there's no progress, I actually stop and I say to both of them, okay, what is the consequence today of us not progressing? What is going to happen if we stop this conversation? What does it mean to you if we stop talking? What does it mean to your children? And I often say, I'm going to give you that question, or those questions, and I'm going to stop the meeting today for 15 minutes. I'm going to go and have a cup of tea, and I advise that you do the same. And I want you just to think about it. And we come back. Interestingly, a lot of the times that when people have had some time away from that conversation, even though it's 5, 10, 15 minutes, is enough time to reflect. Because what happens in conversations is we get giddy, we kind of get caught up in it, and we get moving forward, and we're not arguing. It might be people are arguing, people are not agreeing, and we get caught up in the moment. And what's really important is we go back to why we're there. And seeking a change, because that's what we're there for. Nothing else. We're looking to have a change in the lives that we're currently living. Sometimes giving that space, giving that perspective, helps people just pause and maybe consider something else. And that's my approach. But you know, everybody is open. It is that voluntary process, but I think taking time. But the question is, if you want the legal question, mediation stops. I sign a certificate. Either participant can then make an application to court for the court to intervene. I use the word participant, and a lot of people will say, well, why are you not using the word parties? And I often say that's because we want it to be different from court. This is, whilst it runs alongside, or it can run alongside court proceedings, it is part of the judicial process now. We want to make a difference because these conversations are private. They're not going to be referred to in court. I don't write any reports. I fill in a certificate. I don't write anything about who's right or who's wrong or why it broke down. Just mediation has stopped.
Okay.
So that's my kind of short answer.
No, that's really good, because I think that's the fear for some people, is that they'll be seen like, or it'll get twisted that they're the bad person because they wouldn't carry on. But to know that you just say it just ended, so there's no blame here whatsoever. And
I think that bad person, I'm not making a judgment. That I'm not sitting in the capacity of a magistrate. I am not making a decision. I'm there to facilitate a conversation, and everybody has a history. They've had a million different experiences before they came into the mediation room. And as a mediator, my job is to treat people kindly, fairly, and facilitate a constructive dialogue.
So just thinking again on that, so I think for some parties as well, there's a frustration around that, because maybe the mediator does see some things that would be useful for the court to know. Like, it would be really useful for the mediator to comment and say they wouldn't agree to anything, they wouldn't shift their thinking, they were absolutely adamant in their way. So I think I totally understand why you do what you do, and I can see the safety around that. I just think it's important to also say that can be quite frustrating if you're the party that has gone along and actually you have wanted to be a bit open and offer some level of negotiation, and the other party has been very rigid.
But I think what you can say is that can't be, those conversations can't be discussed in court.
No, I know, but I absolutely. But I just say, I think it can be quite frustrating for the person who's been in that mediation to say, they've sat in a room with a mediator who has seen how difficult they are, how they've used those control tactics, but actually that they can't use that as evidence. So essentially, you get a mediation signature that says it ended, and it's almost like a clean slate for both parties. Both parties can say, "Well, it's the other person's fault," and yet the mediator who had this unique perspective. And I'm not saying that's wrong, and that the mediator should be brought in. I'm just acknowledging that they can be quite frustrating.
I think there has been a massive change recently, and it is that the judicial position is that court is the last place you should be resolving a family dispute, and sometimes it's the only place. But it is anticipated that mediation is exhausted first. So if you don't attempt to do the MIAM, if you don't attempt to mediate, if there isn't, obviously if there's reason such as acute domestic abuse and the process isn't appropriate, then there may be issues to do with safeguarding. Then, of course, the courts will not anticipate that you attend mediation or even attend a MIAM, because there is if you have evidence of domestic abuse, you can ask for an exemption. So, but when there isn't a substantive reason, the definition of substantive is always going to be huge and subjective, then it's something to be aware of, because there have been cost orders being made against participants or parties in court who haven't attempted mediation. So I think there's been a very big culture shift with solicitors, that now they have to let mediation take its course. I often say to solicitors when I'm talking to them, let mediation run alongside at the very minimum of court proceedings if it can do. So, yeah, that's my thoughts on that.
And as with everything within the family, nothing is a perfect system. We're not. No. Nothing is. So we're not trying to make it perfect. And so there's lots of questions that I could ask aside of that, which are sort of for those, what are some of those mechanisms that people can ask for where they don't feel that they want to be in the same room. I know obviously you can do it online like this, but even if that feels uncomfortable to them, they don't want to see their ex's face. They don't want to, they don't want to have those same conversations again over and over again. So how would they ask for that? How would that be agreed? Is there any hoops that they need to jump through in order to get an agreement on it being a different type of mediation?
Yeah. So really, really good question. And I often say to people, you can go through the whole mediation process and never have to say a word or see your ex-partner at all. So you can just speak to someone like me, and then I take your your message to the other participant, and we discuss the points by going backwards and forwards. It takes longer, of course, because having direct conversations is always the better thing if it's safe, but it isn't safe to do so. Or there may be issues of mental health, and nobody wants to make you feel uncomfortable in these meetings. We're there so that you can have a positive conversation where you feel safe. And I think the change, you mentioned online. When I did my training at first, it was all in person, and it's a massive ordeal leaving your house, going to somewhere where you don't know, knowing that your ex-partner is in that building. And now you can be in the comfort of your home. You can feel safe. You can have your dog with you or your cat, and you can be sat in your favorite chair and be surrounded by familiarity. I think people make better decisions when they're in a safe environment that they perceive to be safe than in a formal office where with people that they don't know. I don't wear a suit. I often say that mediators have a special kind of dress code, which is normally brown. For the men, it's normally called a cardigan with the leather patches on the elbows, and normally a beard. It's almost halfway between going to a therapist and a solicitor, because we're neither therapists, even though we are aware and we've had training in certain kind of identifying mental health issues. And we've had training in understanding the law. It's that kind of halfway house, and it's about having a conversation and being in the best environment, because I write a lot about the ecology, and the ecology of mediation, of having a conversation. We have to be in the right headspace. We have to be in the right place, where you're sitting. You have to feel comfortable. And I often start the mediation by just having some quiet, just reflecting, just trying to focus on what we're wanting to achieve today. It might be looking at a photograph of the children. And just having that space, because we live such busy lives where we have constant dialogue in our head. And the job of the mediator is to create that space to allow for things to happen differently. So people might find it a little bit hippie. I've even read poetry at the beginning of one very tricky mediation. Philip Larkin. If you look it up, I can't possibly read it in a webinar, but it is a poem about how trauma passes from generation to generation. because ultimately the conversation that we have about how we manage our separation, how we manage our divorce, is going to inform and educate our children about how they will manage conflict and when they have their relationships and in the future. So mediators have a very important role. I often say, students ask me when they're training to be a mediator, what does a mediator do? A mediator is a therapist. A mediator is a legal expert. A mediator is an educator. We have so many different roles with it, and it is you're kind of juggling them constantly whilst managing a very difficult conversation. So I also think that you've got to have a connection with your mediator. You've got to be able to feel comfortable. And if I can say in that initial meeting, is your time to say, well, you know what, I've been a victim of domestic abuse. I really feel that I can't talk to a woman. I feel I can't talk to a man. Explain that. Because we have male and female mediators, and of course we're impartial, but it's about trying to facilitate that ecosystem, that ecology for the best conversation to be had. So, getting everything off your chest in your mind is the most important thing. That really open conversation. Your ex-partner is not going to know anything about what you say in that meeting.
That's good to know. So I am conscious of time, so I'm going to kind of cherry pick some bits. So let's look at this in terms of how would you advise someone to use mediation strategically as part of this process?
That's a really good question.
Especially, like I say, but bearing in mind the types of personalities that we're dealing with strategically.
Yeah. So this is a very good question, and I often say you have, and I'm going to be very careful how I word it because I don't want my colleagues who are mediators getting upset. You should always enter mediation with a genuine wish to find a resolution. Having a conversation, you're going to understand the issues that they have with the current arrangements. It's like playing a game of cards. Now in court, you never show your cards, but in mediation, it's an open and frank dialogue. So you get to understand the position of the other people. So strategic, what have you got to lose? It's a legally privileged conversation. And you're going to understand better the position of the other participants in mediation. So if you do go to court, there's not going to be as many surprises because you've already had that conversation. So strategic, there you go. That's one strategy.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, like I say, it's a good chance to know that kind of end game that they might not reveal at any other point during the process.
Naturally, you can't use it in court, but you would be aware of it.
Yeah, well, it would form the basis for your strategy, which is the way that I kind of do. So what can and can't it do in terms of agreements? So again, dealing a lot of people, they might sit in mediation and their ex-partner will say, yeah, great, yeah, we'll do that. Yeah. And then 3 minutes out, they get a text message and they've already gone, no, I'm not agreeing to any of that. What weight can it, what weight does it have? What weight can it have? Is there is there protection around what's agreed?
So number one is not legally binding. So I often say that if you want legally binding order, then the only place that you can get that is generally court. Okay. So with that in mind, there are halfway houses. So the best halfway house is a parenting plan. The parenting plan outlines the arrangements for you and your ex-partner to parent your children. And you both sign that document, and that document is not legally privileged. So it's an agreement between the two of you, made in mediation, prepared by the mediator, and it outlines everything that you both agreed to do. So it might be, I agree that I'll pick the children up outside Morrison's at 4 o'clock on a Friday and then drop them back at school on Monday at 8:30. It will detail, and the advantage of a parenting plan is it's bespoke.
Mm-hmm.
It's tailor-made to your family. So, and it can be very, very detailed. The court order generally will go into that level of detail that a parenting plan has. That parenting plan, as I've said, is not legally binding, and it's not legally privileged. But if you did decide, if let's say it didn't work after that, like you said, Sarah, and they'd signed it, you could then present that as evidence in your court case. So that's something to be mindful. So that is a really useful document if we're talking about child arrangements.
Absolutely, that's great. Thank you. So what, again, and I've got to be careful because I'm not implying that you would do this, but for people who have maybe dealt with a mediator who they felt is being manipulated by the other party or participant, and is there a way for them to kind of bring that to the attention of the mediator? How can the person who maybe they've lived with it for years, they know the signs, they feel it, their spidey senses know when manipulation is on the table, but maybe the mediator doesn't, they've not experienced it, they're not as attuned to it. How would the person who does spot it bring that up in a way that doesn't come across as being controlling or aggressive or blaming, but in a way that brings something positive to these new conversations?
So I often always use I statements. So often when I talk to people about conflict resolution, if you talk about I statements, well, it might be, you're making me feel I'm feeling really uncomfortable in this situation. You're not blaming anybody. So I often would say, tell the mediator is important. If you're feeling uncomfortable, and you need to tell the mediator, don't sit there. And you might just say, you know what, is it possible? Thank you very much. Is it possible we could go into shuttle? So I often say to people that shuttle, where the mediator goes between you and face to face, like we're having a conversation now, Sarah, is fluid. And you don't have to wait for the mediator to say, well, actually, can we go into shuttle? You can say to the mediator, I'd like to go into shuttle if possible. And then you can explain to the mediator a little bit about, and it might help that alone, that move from face to face into shuttle may stop the issue that you're facing, or you might just want to explain. So that's one option that's available to you, and it generally works quite well. Or you might just want to, you can terminate at any point during the meeting as well. If you, again, like I said, it's a voluntary process and everybody's forcing you. But always tell the mediator, try and have that conversation with the mediator. Most mediators are, really good communicators, that they wouldn't be there. And if sometimes, you are the expert of your ex-partner. I often say that. You are the expert. You know how they work. And I, as a mediator, often say to people, okay, tell me more about, is this expected? Is this behavior expected? Is this common? You know better than anybody else to educate me. So always make the mediator aware of everything that you can. So the mediator can help you and assist that conversation to be safe, to be KFC.
Great, thank you. I think that gives a level of relief for people that they can say, this is what I'm recognizing, just to make you aware, and that kind of thing. Because I do think a lot of people
start with I
and hold it.
Start with I. Because that's very powerful, and you're not making a judgment.
Yeah. Okay, that's done that one. So just a final sort of question around this is, what training do mediators have on recognizing post-separation abuse, whether that be the coercive control of the adult, coercive control of a child, you know, coercive control within the relationship itself, coercive control of themselves, sometimes emotional abuse, all of that. What training do they have? And so when someone is choosing a mediator, are there things that they should be asking? Do you have, you know, have you done this training? Have you done that training? So that they can feel safe that actually this person does, at least in theory, understand the dynamics that is going to be presenting within this mediation.
So yeah, safeguarding is a huge part of our job, and it's safeguarding of the participants in mediation, the children, anybody else that is referred to within the kind of conversations that we have. Every mediator does a foundation course, and safeguarding is part of that. And safeguarding is certainly taking centre stage with the Family Mediation Council currently, trying to upskill and provide assessment tools for safeguarding. Within our own practice, we really encourage and pay for additional training for our mediators to have safeguarding training, and we have conversations about it in our quarterly meetings, which we're going to in the next 20 minutes. Safeguarding is always centre stage of everything that we do. It has to be the primary concern of every mediator, that we are not facilitating well, the mantra of a very good mediator, who's a civil and commercial mediator, is do no harm.
Do no harm, yeah.
And I think as a mediator, that's your mantra, is do no harm. Don't make the situation any worse than it is. And I often not keep that in mind. And safeguarding is essential, especially, I have to say, safeguarding doesn't just stop at the initial meeting, the mediation information and assessment meeting. It's a continual process that the mediators have to monitor throughout the whole journey of someone in mediation. So yeah, very, very important to me and to my colleagues.
Fantastic. What I might do, again, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I've got quite a lot of questions that I wrote down, and would it be okay if I sent you them and you have a very quick response to them, and then I can share them as part of the package? So I am going to open up the chat now properly. So if you've got any questions, do pop them in there. Okay, here we go, straight off the bat.
Oh, great question from
Liberty. You read that yourself rather than me read it out.
I'll just bring it up. So read it out so we can all.
Is it ever possible for mediation to continue once court proceedings have started, or does beginning the court process usually bring mediation to an end? My ex-husband has been controlling and coercive, has said his solicitor believes some practices allow both to run alongside each other. I'm concerned this may be another method of control, and I'd like to understand whether this is accurate or typical. I think you kind of covered that earlier and said it was.
I can say a little bit more. So what I do see a lot now is judges, magistrates, having attended a first hearing, listening to the case, and mediation hasn't been exhausted, okay, in their opinion, and that the case from their perspective is suitable. This is an interesting dialogue. Now, they say we have a lot of them come to court, come to mediation and say, oh, well, the court has ordered mediation. It's never an order because it's a direction. So there's a very finite difference in how it's worded. So there will be a direction from the court to attempt mediation. Now, that's a direction, it's not an order. So it's like advice from a friend. And yes, of course, it's going to be encouraged, but it's still a voluntary process. One of the key principles of mediation is voluntary. So you can still say no. Mediators don't write reports. And you can ask for it in shuttle. I guess another aspect was, can it run alongside court? Yes, it can. That's very, very common now. So you may have a direction once you've started court, but to go back to mediation, normally what happens is there's an adjournment for 6 weeks to allow mediation to take place, as you would allow for a Section 7 report. In many cases, adjournments are 6 weeks, and then that would let mediation take place. And you would come back and say, yeah, we reached an agreement. I want a consent order outlining X, Y, and Z. Or you may say, well, we came to a conclusion on these matters, but we still have these matters unresolved. So you've limited the issues. So all the time, always remember it's a voluntary process, even though it's directed by court. If you run alongside courts, remember nothing's legally binding in mediation. So don't worry too much. Okay, just do it if you think it's right, and that you can think, well, I don't have to speak to this person. I don't have to be in the same room. I only have to speak to the mediator. And you don't have to agree with anything. So hope that's answered. I got a thumbs up from Liberty.
Got a thumbs up there. So that's great. Thank you. Okay, I am going to open it to 1689 DB. I feel like I'm a game show host saying this. Listen, 1689 DB 43GH. Would you like to unmute yourself and ask Stuart your question?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can. Yes. What's your name? Give me a name that you want to use. Ben.
My name's Ben. Yeah. So my question would be, and you may not have an answer, but are there alternatives to mediation if it simply feels too traumatic to engage with an ex-partner, even via shuttle mediation, particularly around separating finances, assets, etc.? The primary focus obviously is on the children, but our children are older, one of which is an adult, and the other two are going to be an adult in a year. So it's unlikely it would ever end up anywhere near the family courts, I believe. So the other process, or is it something you just have to find a way to suck it up and get through it?
Yeah. You can have solicitor-led negotiations. So your two solicitors can have conversations with. So your solicitor can have conversations with the other party's solicitor. Okay. So you don't have to have any direct conversations. It can be very expensive doing it that way. So you're kind of leaving the mediating to the solicitors based on your instructions, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. That would be the only option. You can go to arbitration, but nobody ever does that because it's phenomenally expensive. I think it starts at 6,000, but it could be quite cheap in the long term if you're thinking about, cost of solicitors. Contested divorce case can start at 10 and easily get up to 30 without much of a problem.
Wow.
I think you've always got to think, and I'm not doing solicitors a disservice. They have a very important role within the judicial system, but mediators are there to support a resolution. That's what we get paid for. Solicitors, they get more money because of, so what happens? How do they make more money? They make more money from
conflict.
Yeah. So we've got two very different drivers in that situation. So, and I was having a conversation with the Law Society in London about it's a tricky one, isn't it? Because, solicitors have a role, but also so do mediators. When do solicitors hand over cases to mediators? Are they losing money by doing that? And that's the conflict within the legal system. And that's something that we all have to be very mindful about, is that when we engage professionals, what the conflicts might be. So does that help a little bit?
It does indeed. I guess it's a case of, okay, can't necessarily afford 30 grand on a solicitor. I've got to find a way to suck it up and
Mackenzie friends, but it's again is a cheaper way of trying to work your way through the judicial system. But ultimately there has to be some form of conversation, doesn't there? It's who's going to have that conversation, if it's a solicitor or if it's via a mediator. And I think if you get a really good mediator, I think there's a lot of underestimating mediator skills in finding a resolution to an issue.
Yeah.
And I think, there's the good, the bad, and the ugly, just like solicitors, like anybody. You get very good mediators, and then you get mediators who aren't as good. And it's the same with solicitors. And you've got to have that bond. Both of you have to trust the mediator, because it is that kind of going into the unknown, which is really scary. But yeah, right. So I'm waffling. So Sarah,
That's okay. I'm just conscious of your time and not wanting you to be late for your own meeting. What I would add to that, Ben, is the element that you have any control over there is your trauma responses. So I would be working on trying to learn your triggers, how to manage them, because this process is traumatic, but you can do some work on that. There's tools within the corporate toolkit, the I Am Safe regulation tools that you can use to start to, so that although it's not going to take away any of that feeling of it being traumatic, it will lessen it. And when you deal with that, actually your brain actually can start finding solutions a lot faster. When your brain's in trauma, shut down, it ain't going to come up with any solutions. That's when you get stuck a lot of the time.
Yeah.
So if you open yourself up more, then you might find actually you could have some of those conversations yourself, as opposed to this, no, I can't even go there, which I get totally. I'm not saying you're wrong in that, but I just think that's something that is within your power to do that work, so that it can ease the way for you to manage more of this, rather than outsourcing it to someone who, like Stuart said, has a different agenda.
Yeah. No, okay. Thank you. That's really clear and helpful. Thank you.
I think it goes back to that, being able to be stopping that conversation in your head at the beginning of the mediation, having that breathing space. I often slow down my speed of talking, because what we're trying to do is slow down the thought process, create the space for new thoughts to happen. I know it all seems a bit hippie and new age, but it's there to try and...
I think if mediators were more emotionally intelligent, and again, I don't want to criticize them I'm not putting them all in the same bucket, but I think if mediators and judges and solicitors were more emotionally intelligent, they could recognize through speech patterns alone, okay, this person is moving into that trauma response. Anyway, we're going slightly off track with that, but
I see there's two questions that I'd love to answer.
One of them you've already kind of answered before, so let's look at Kavitha's, which is, what is the benefit of hybrid mediation, and what are the rules for the solicitors who attend hybrid mediation?
I love hybrid mediation. It works really, really well, because everybody's in the room, or it can be. So the last one I did was a family with very complex financial issues. They had a very big business worth millions, and I'm not a financial expert in dealing with that kind of the tax implications. I'm aware of things like that, but we need experts, and their solicitors were experts in the best ways of splitting complex assets, and to have them to give advice to the clients is very important. In the mediation, the solicitors don't speak. I often have that as a rule. They have to be quiet. They're there to advise the clients, and the participants, they can pause the mediation at any point to get legal advice. Last one I did went amazingly well, because we could draft the kind of consent order there and then, and have it signed and then rubber stamped by the court. So it works really, really well, because people are not having to, because I can't give legal advice. I can give legal information, and I might know the answer. It can feel very frustrating, but I can't do it, because that would be breaching my code of practice. I can give legal information, but that's sometimes not enough. And often I have to say to participants, okay, you're at a point now where you need legal advice. And that's the role of a solicitor, to go away and advise you accordingly. And hopefully then they come back with an informed position on knowing what they can, what's reasonable, and if it's something that the courts will consider, if they're going to have it, if they're going to ask the courts for an order, because it has to be a reasonable and thought out kind of resolution, and it has to be, there's the whole kind of conversation I kind of have about testing the practicalities of of agreements that people come to. So yeah, it's huge. All these kind of things are, legal advice. What happens is in hybrid mediation is you don't lose momentum. I think that's the key thing I would take from that. You're moving forward. Obviously, a lot more expensive, more professionals involved, but maybe the speed of resolution may be quicker.
It is advised for situations like this because it takes the wind out of the sails of someone who wants to bring conflict. Like you say, it's financially dependent on whether you can afford to do it. She does ask, are there any rules? And I know you mentioned your particular rule. Are there any rules as part of the judicial process, or is it just the mediator putting boundaries in place? Do solicitors have any rules to follow if they are in?
No, they have to work it. All solicitors in their ethics have to work in the interests of their clients.
Okay.
They also working in the interests of your client is helping people to find a resolution ultimately, but they're advising whether this is the resolution that would work best for them. So it's, everybody has a difficult role. It's a difficult situation, but like you say, it's about treating the whole conversation and everybody in that with, you're dealing with the most precious things in your life, your children. You're dealing with maybe your future, whether you can afford to have a home. And it's the most I see people at the most vulnerable point in their lives.
Yeah.
And I think you have to be kind. You have to be fair. You have to encourage those qualities within a meeting. And also create the space to have that new conversation in a safe way. So
again, I'm conscious of time. I would love to get into, people who don't have those emotional mediators that don't have those emotional boundaries and get swept up in the drama. But that's for a different day. So, final question, which you did cover. So, can we just clarify again? Can agreements made in mediation be legally binding by lawyers or the court?
Yeah, absolutely. So there is something called the no order principle in court. So it's always the most draconian thing. I remember when I had my judicial training, the most draconian thing a court can do is put an order on a family. So it has to be, is this order, is it really necessary? And the judges will look at, is there a history of maybe domestic abuse, maybe there's a history of controlling behavior, maybe there's been a long period of a child not having contact with one of their parents, and that an order is absolutely necessary to bring an equilibrium back into the lives of the people. So yeah.
And you said the best one was a parenting
plan is your halfway house.
Well, it's not legally binding. It can be used as evidence going forward if they
absolutely. So it focuses everybody, doesn't it, on that they've made an agreement, they've signed a document, and that is their intention to carry out those arrangements that have been discussed in mediation.
Great. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you to everyone who's contributed great questions, and thank you to Stuart for sharing behind the scenes of the world of mediation. Like I said, I will send you the full list of my questions, some of which we have answered, but I think they might be quite useful. Don't send me much. And thank you everyone to joining us this morning. I hope that you found the information valuable, and I'll see you on the next workshop. So take care.
Thank you very much. And if anybody wants to get in contact with me or have a conversation, they're very much welcome. And I'm sure Sarah will share my contact.
I will share your contact details. Within the next 48 hours, I will send out the recording and the toolkit that will go with it. And Stuart's contact details will be included in all of that as well. So yeah, thank you so much, and enjoy.
And I hope all of you find a resolution as well to the issues that you're facing today.
Absolutely, yeah, that's great. And you could find yourself quite busy, Stuart.
That's okay. It's always good.
All right,
take care.
Everyone. Thanks everyone.
Bye bye, everybody. Bye.
Take care. Bye.